We'll begin by zooming up on this second column detail here. And what we're going to look at first is applying rebar constraints. For example, you can see here that we have an L bar and the main reinforcement bar of our column. If I select this main reinforcement bar here and I change the bar type to perhaps a number 11 bar, you'll notice that the L bar doesn't move, and in fact now there's a clash between the two reinforcement bars. To stop this clash happening and to make the bars update intelligently, I need to add a rebar constraint between the two reinforcement bars. To do this, I'm going to select the L bar, and on the context ribbon, I'm going to select Edit Constraints. Now in a 3D view, I first select the L bar, and you can now see I have the plane that I want to constrain to, and I can either select a cover here or another reinforcement bar. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick my main bar here. And you'll now notice that I have the distance of clear space in between the two reinforcement bars. Now I can toggle that so I can go from bar center to the tangent faces of the rebar. Here, if I want to give a gap, I can do that. So for example, if I wanted a 1-inch gap in between the two bars, I could type in 1 inch and you can now see the bar moves. Of course, if I want to go the other way, I can type in -1 inch and the bar travels in the opposite direction. Here, we'll set this to 0. On the context ribbon, I can now click Finish. And now, if I select my main reinforcement bar, and I change my bar type back to bar number 11, you can now see the L bar responds to that change. So now we can guarantee that the reinforcement will update intelligently. Next, we add some rebar couplers to the other column. So here you'll notice that we have some gaps ready to insert some reinforcement couplers. The first thing you might notice here is the gap isn't consistent. You can see there are different gaps between all the reinforcement bars. This doesn't matter. The actual length of the reinforcement bar will update when the coupler is applied. So let's go ahead now and add a coupler. On the structure ribbon, click Rebar Coupler. On the context ribbon, you'll note there are two options. We can place a coupler to the end of a bar. This will be useful for an anchor. Or we can place couplers between two bars. In the Properties palette, in the Type selector, we can then choose the type of coupler we want to apply. Notice here we have our anchor couplers up the top. We also have our standard couplers here, or we have transition couplers between different types of bar. So then we can go ahead and place our coupler. We can then continue to place those couplers out. And we'll put the final coupler in. Once the couplers are created, you'll now notice that the distance between the two bars is precisely controlled by the engagement inside the coupler family. For example, if I select one of these couplers here, and I select Edit Type, you'll notice in the type properties that we have things like external diameter, but here we have the bar engagement, and this automatically lengthens or shortens the reinforcement bar to match that engagement.